Hello, everybody. We're going to be talking today about social capital and social networks and why these concepts are important for you and your students and what they imply about economic mobility. Let me begin with a quote. New graduates are entering a working world that is pitched as never before in favor of the well-connected and the socially knowledgeable and the rich. This statement is the conclusion of a New York Times story about a young man in Britain, Joe, the son of a low-income single mother. He graduated from an elite university, the Harvard-Yale equivalent, and found himself unable to access the job market for which he had prepared. The reasons? Affluent graduates had families who set them up in London, helped them with rent, paid their living expenses during their job searches, and most important, introduced them to work friends and acquaintances. They had prestigious unpaid internships during university vacations and had connected with potential employers. They had built substantial social capital, while Joe, working at low-wage jobs during vacations, had a huge college loan debt that he was paying off. The fairy tale end of Joe's story is that a wealthy friend's parents stepped in to set him up just the way they had their own children. But most stories don't end that way. Older youth and adult students from low-income backgrounds make enormous sacrifices to attend 2- and 4-year colleges. Most are like Joe, working part or full-time while studying. They arrive at college with a commitment to gaining new knowledge and skills that will launch them into better jobs. But what these students may not fully comprehend is the degree to which getting a better paying and more satisfying job requires reaching out to and forming relationships or connections with strangers and acquaintances who can help. Reaching out, whether through an internship or simply by strategizing ways to meet new and well-connected people, comes under the ubiquitous term networking. In today's world, where job openings are posted for all to see on online job sites, the system may seem fairer than it once was. However, despite easy access to online job sites, job seekers are increasingly advised to make personal connections with a hiring manager or someone who can get to such a person. Ironically, whom you know has become even more important than it was in the days when information about jobs passed mainly by word of mouth. What is social capital? Why is networking, which is one way to build social capital, so important? What is the value in a job search of actively seeking relationships outside of one's community and friendship circle? And how do race, class, and gender impact one's ability to successfully make use of a connector or link to a company or sector of interest? I'm going to talk about these questions in this session. As substantial data shows, the levels of both income and wealth of one's family of origin is not only associated with level of education, but with post-graduation earnings. Lower income graduates earn less over a lifetime than their affluent peers with the same college degree. For example, the Georgetown Center on Education and the Economy looked at the highest paying college majors and then compared incomes of African American and white graduates with the same majors. In all except the STEM fields, African Americans earned lower wages than their similarly educated peers. We should not interpret this data to suggest that a college degree isn't worth it for low-income people. The wage premium is worth it, along with the many other intellectual and social opportunities that accrue from getting a college degree. But the bottom line is not surprising. While there is a premium for low-income people getting a bachelor's degree rather than stopping at high school, it's not as high as that for people who start out with economic advantages. It's just a case of the rich getting richer. Let's take a look at some data. Here's the question that we're going to be addressing. One data point to keep in mind as we look at this set of slides is that more than 53 million, 44% of all workers aged 18 to 64 are low-wage workers by the Brookings Institution criteria. They earn median hourly wages of $10.22 an hour and median annual earnings of $17,000. Okay, now we're going to take a look at some data. This graph includes all birth cohorts from 1940. The way to read this is starting on the left top. 90% of all children born in the 1940s earn more than their parents. That's me. In many cases, what you have are middle-class families helping their children way into their 40s today, so that it's now the other way around. Parents, about half of parents are earning more than their young people, and young people require a lot of support. We'll see that a college degree makes a difference for some more than others. This slide is based on wealth, not income. The lowest wealth group is 40% of the population. The middle is another 40% in this slide, and the highest is 20%. By wealth, we mean the total family's assets: home, car, savings account, and other things of that sort. Half of all college graduates come from families with more than $190,000 in net wealth, and a fifth of graduates, a smaller number, from households with wealth of at least $500,000. This is the group whose college graduation rates have increased most sharply, as you can see here, from 46% to 60%. One more fact: the bottom two quintiles, 30% of these do not own a home. For those who do, the average home value is $64,000. So one of the ways to take a look at this is through the panel study of income dynamics, which shows that the top 10% have wealth of about 1.2 million, which is 57 times the bottom 80%, which is 21,000. Now we're going to take a look at one more slide. This one is about the inheritance of wealth. The way to read this slide is that 44% of children born in the top quintile of parental wealth stay in the top quintile as adults. See where the arrow is pointing. The term we use for this is intergenerational transmission of wealth, and the two channels by which wealth is transferred are education and inheritance. An upwardly mobile family who came from poverty and has, for example, an income of $150,000, that's different from being in the second or third generation of an upper middle class family with an income like that and additional assets because of inherited wealth. We're going to move to the next slide. So here's the big problem. This slide shows that the proportional increase in lifetime earnings for obtaining a bachelor's degree for those who grew up poor is less than for those who grew up middle to upper class. We compare here the earning differentials for low income and non-low income people with bachelor's degree versus a high school diploma. College graduates from families with income above 185% of the poverty level earned 136% more over their careers than those with a high school diploma. So college made a big difference in earnings, but college graduates from families with an income below 185% of the poverty level earn 71% more over their careers than high school graduates, while college graduates who started out with means had a gain of almost twice that of low-income students. Finally, we take a look at mobility issues. What we see is that over the years, the spread between the lowest income and highest income families has increased. So moving up the ladder has gotten harder and harder because the rungs of the ladder are further apart. This is not the answer. So one conclusion from the data is that if you start out low income, to gain higher than predicted returns, other factors need to come into play, as we note in the following. Here are a few hypotheses about why low-income people earn less. Fewer professional connections and networks, less polished mainstream professional skills, lack of a sense of entitlement, biases of employers, and lack of knowledge about what they might earn or what careers are available. Also, low-income people may have lower risk tolerance and lower likelihood of self-promotion. Many of these factors can be explained by a lack of the kind of social capital needed to move up in the labor market. What is social capital? Here we're going to rely on two definitions among many. One is from the social theorist Nan Lin at Duke University. The second combines concepts from several scholars. Nan Lin defines social capital as resources embedded in one's social networks, resources that can be accessed or mobilized through ties in the networks. Through such social relations or social networks, an actor may borrow or capture other actors' resources. These social resources can then generate a return for the actor. Lin's definition translates the word capital, meaning financial assets, into a metaphor for social relations. Social capital returns value through human rather than financial assets, mainly through connecting one person with another or with a network. Important for those looking to move from lower paying hourly wage jobs to professional ones, Lin defines resources to be mobilized as wealth, power, and reputation. He asserts that a contact's superior status is what helps in a job search. In the second definition, social capital is the goodwill available to individuals and groups. Its effects flow from the information, influence, and solidarity it makes to the actor. A social group's or individual stock of social capital can be thought of as a reservoir of social trust and support that she or he can tap into in a time of need. The metaphor of a reservoir or store of goodwill is what stands out here. What are social networks? Today, the term social network makes us think of online communities where people sharing interests come together and those seeking connections can find like-minded others. But the term social network was borrowed by the tech world from a sociological tradition that studied human networks long before the internet. In network theory, social networks provide access to the resources embedded in social capital. Networks have positive and negative aspects. To the degree to which a network is closed, that it admits only like-minded people who share values or identity, a fraternity, a religious or ethnic group, a social club, it is exclusive. And with exclusivity comes a variety of advantages. Members enjoy affiliation. Similar people have more contact and connections with each other than people who are different from each other. The best common phrase is birds of a feather flock together. But closed networks limit people's social worlds in a way that has powerful implications for the information they receive, the attitudes they form, and the interactions they experience. Race, ethnicity, gender, and class create the strongest divides in our personal environments, with age, religion, education, and occupation following in that order. The negative side of closed networks, then, is that people within the network often want affiliation because they prefer to exclude those who are different. And even if the intention or aim is not exclusion explicitly, as anyone who will agree who remembers the cliques of high school, learning the norms and behaviors to gain acceptance is challenging, can take time, and is sometimes close to impossible. Certainly, if exclusion is based on observable race, ethnicity, gender, language, or assumptions about class from a blink moment, then entry may be impossible, although the mechanisms of exclusion may not be explicit. It's important to note that most networks fall somewhere on a continuum between open and closed. For example, JFS Workplace Facebook page is open only to employees, but that's a large and diverse group, and there are sub-networks within it. A body of research focused on how people find and get jobs suggests that the closer the ties in a network, the more likely it is for members to have the same information. Thus, for access to new labor market opportunities, multiple degrees of separation are important. Job seekers need bridges or links between their networks and those of higher status. Thus, a researcher's phrase, the strength of weak ties. Mark Granovetter is a sociologist who in 1973 wrote a very influential article which really changed the way in which people think about networks. Up until then, and now still, the main work on networks is about how they function in themselves. How are networks formed? Who connects with whom? But Granovetter was studying how people got jobs. And what he saw was that he needed to understand how networks interact with each other. He saw that to get a good job and move up, successful people connected with someone who was a friend of a friend or a colleague, or someone with whom they worked but who was not a close friend. He called this by the counterintuitive phrase, the strength of weak ties. You may know this term by 6 degrees of separation. The reason that weak ties are better than close ties is that people in your own closed community or network know the same things you do and are likely to be in a similar economic position. So theorists distinguish between ties of family, relatives, and acquaintances. Each is important, but acquaintances and beyond are most important in accessing the job market. There's one final dimension of social capital theory that's important to keep in mind regarding the following question. By what means and under what conditions does social capital produce returns? Or more specifically, how do networks used in job searches operate? For a job seeker, the capital to be accessed might consist of a linkage with someone who can provide a reference, or someone who will make a call on behalf of a candidate, or even someone who might only provide informal intel about what the qualifications and the profile are for the employer who is seeking a new a new employee. These are the resources available in general, but access capital is of little value unless and until it is mobilized, and mobilization depends on an interaction between actors for a specific end. For example, often people call my office asking that I put in a good word for them with our hiring managers. I can say politely, "Oh, I'm so pleased you're interested in our organization," but nothing more. I can say, "I think you'd be a terrific candidate. We'd be lucky to have you." And then I can act, or I can do nothing. Or I can say, "Happy to help. I'll call X the minute we hang up because I know the candidate by reputation and think her resume brings exactly what we need." This brings us to tech-based networking platforms. I bet you're already asking yourself, isn't building social capital through networks like LinkedIn? Isn't that what LinkedIn is supposed to do? And yes, networking sites are intended to simplify, make more efficient, and speed the connection-making process and thus the job search. LinkedIn is good for many things: to find people about whom you already know something, to post business-related updates, and yes, to collect connections at various degrees of separation. I also use it as a kind of address book and resume bank. But there is little evidence that LinkedIn helps people get better jobs. And for low-income workers unused to the professional world, creating a LinkedIn profile is itself a confusing and anxiety-provoking exercise. It speaks directly to the issues raised about who defines professional or soft skills and how they are racialized, class-influenced, and gendered. In a book called Down and Out in the New Economy, Ilana Gershon observes importantly that the underlying assumption of LinkedIn is that users are white-collar professionals already, not workers seeking to enter the profession. For example, to have a profile that ranks all-star on LinkedIn's profile strengths meter, the user is expected to supply daunting information that would stymie many, and especially new graduates of community college programs seeking better pay. All-stars provide their industry and location and up-to-date current position with a description, 2 past positions, their education, their skills, minimum of 3, a profile photo, and at least 50 connections. We're going to take a look at a little bit of the information that one finds easily on LinkedIn. This is one of many websites giving people advice about how to do a LinkedIn profile. And what is key here, a profile is successful when the views start piling up, the introductions roll in, comments increase on whatever you post, and recruiters are getting in touch to ask what they can do for you. And so it goes. And in the next slide, these are pitfalls and problems to avoid when doing your profile. So skipping personalizations, for example. One of the things that we find with low-income students is that they're not used to talking the talk that you need to connect socially with an employer. One of the things that I just recently read was an article about job interviews, that the question about, tell me about yourself, is really just a throwaway, a warm-up. But many people get very intimidated by it, and especially those who have been brought up in families where they're not expected to talk about themselves. And so you can see here that this is a very professional kind of advice, and it is intended for people who know how to read this kind of thing and can follow these directions. So we're going to end, LinkedIn assumes certain norms that make it of limited use for the unemployed or hourly wage worker. If you don't already work in an office, how do you enter a LinkedIn conversation in which, as Gershon says, talk on LinkedIn is the same way you talk in the office? There are certain boundaries around what is acceptable. LinkedIn, she said, is characterized as a non-office office with thousands of bosses, none of them yours, all potentially watching you. All of this suggests that LinkedIn might be a place to learn or observe professional office behavior, but it is not a place to bring an authentic self, especially a marginalized self, nor to critically interrogate workplace culture or expectations. One needs to read the culture of a hiring employer and adjust one's self-presentation to expectations. This is akin to code switching or shifting from one linguistic code to another, depending on the social context or conversational setting. Adjusting one's self-presentation could be seen as a broader form of switching in which a person modifies dress, body language, and even what one chooses to emphasize about one's personal and work history. You talk, dress, and behave differently with a group of peers having drinks than you do in a work interview. But much of what is demanded in the work interview is what Arlie Hochschild, a sociologist, calls middle-class sociability, or the way people talk in a professional office. This is a performance that can be learned, but it is not easy to code switch for an interview if you have little relevant experience to draw on. Nor is it easy if the person doing the interview is looking for someone who fits or is just like those already hired. Gershon argues again in a Harvard Business Review article, it's important to note that even a reference may not change one of the most problematic results of networking, relatively homogeneous workplaces. After all, if no one of color or from a working class background was hired into the office, there are fewer people to spread the word that the job existed in the first place. So here's the conclusion of these spots. Tech-based platforms like LinkedIn cannot answer those critical hiring manager questions. What is this person like? Will she fit into my company? Does he understand the company's values and ways of working? And setting oneself up to move from a lower income job to a professional one, if you're not familiar with middle class sociability, requires understanding the world you want to enter and learning how to navigate. I'm going to end this talk with a couple of quotes from students at Gutman Community College's Ethnographies of Work course, a year-long required liberal arts course that addresses all the issues I've been discussing. These young students, mainly of color from low-income families in New York City, tell you about how empowering it was to spend a year in college studying labor markets, workplace cultures, gender, race, and class issues, and observing in a wide range of workplaces. So here is one young woman. I've been on a lot of interviews and I've had to learn how to communicate by myself. No one taught me how to. My mom, she would always tell me, do good, but no one actually taught me how to prepare. We learned, this is from what she learned in her EOW class. We learned the elevator pitch, and the skill we mostly had to build up was communication skills. To have communication skills, you need to speak out more about yourself and who you are. What I really like about EOW is to do the interviews, and I feel like that makes people feel open, and it takes people out of their shell. It took me out of my shell, my little turtle shell, and let me speak out and not be scared. I will talk to anybody. Hello, my name is Jenna. I'm very outspoken now. And finally, this is a student who graduated from Gutman, a CUNY two-year college, finished the four-year college, is now in grad school, and she's reflecting on what she learned in a very broad way. One thing I learned is that our careers are created and built. It's not just that you get your degree, you learn a set of skills, you get a job and apply it. It's not given to you that way. So I learned more of career dynamics and how we're always learning and navigating through different stages. It's not as clear-cut as learning how to do one thing. You get a specific task and you do it. So this young woman has moved from understanding that it's not all about technical skills, but it's about many other things, and there is a premium on learning about these things, particularly for low-income people. So I hope these remarks on social capital and social networks have been helpful to you. There's a lot more to think about, and particularly, how do we translate these kinds of concepts so they really end up helping our students move up in the economic ladder. Thanks very much for your attention.